So.
Great presentation. Thanks, Mark. Love it.
Glad you're able to catch it this time, Suzanne. I'm Norm Green. I lead the GemStone Smalltalk team at GemStone, now VMware. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about the roadmap. But first, I am going to what we call in OO programming reuse an idea I saw from Elliot yesterday, which is when you have an extremely dry subject matter to present, you do whatever you can to lighten it up a little. So let me see if I can get this to work.
I'm worried about little Wilbert. He's not like other kids.
What do you mean?
Yesterday, I left him alone for a minute, and he disassembled the TV, our clock, and the stereo.
That's perfectly normal.
Can you hear it?
Let's take things apart.
Oh, the part that worries me is he used the components to build a ham radio set.
Oh dear.
Is that bad?
Normally I'd want to run an EEG on him, but the machine isn't working. It's worse than I feared.
What is it?
I'm afraid your son has the knack.
The knack?
The knack. It's a rare condition characterized by an extreme intuition about all things mechanical and electrical and other social ineptitude.
Can he lead a normal life?
No. He'll be an engineer.
You have to post the URL to the speakers, please.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to
You're assuming I obtained it legally, Elliot. And just one more because it's the end of the day.
Out there today, watch for an accident on the 101 near Sherman Way, and we're just getting word that the 405 southbound has been shut down completely. It's like some sort of police activity. It's got to clear for a 2-mile stretch from the 118 all the way up to Victory. As soon as we get more information, we'll let you know. But in the meantime, we'll get you through with another 40 minutes of your favorite hit song.
Anyway. Okay. Few topics to talk about. first of all, the merger and acquisition, the event that happened last May. This is the first time we've been here since that. On May 17th, we were acquired by VMware. It's a much larger company, needless to say, than GemStone. 8,000 employees around the world. It's a Silicon Valley company. It's a very technical company, being from the Valley. And actually, the site is right up the road from the old Xerox Park Place, which we took as being some kind of good karma for us. It's only been 6 months since the merger, but not a lot has changed. Really, within GemStone, same engineering team is there, same support team. The reporting structure is new. I have a new boss. And better snacks in the lunchroom. You know, not really a whole lot to write home about. More bureaucracy. I spend more time filling out forms than I ever have in my life. But it's been very positive, I think, for the team. And we're better funded. It's easier for me to get hardware and resources now than it has been for a long time, which has been very good. So we're quite happy about it. And I promised Monty I'd do this slide because he's working on this. You may have heard about this thing called Maglev. And Maglev is a Ruby VM which is built on top of our Smalltalk VM. It's our kind of foray into the Ruby community. And it's a very good fit technically because, like Smalltalk, Ruby is a dynamic, untyped language. And it lends itself to all the work we put into the VM over the years, and it runs very fast. But it's not a replacement by any stretch. It's more of an R&D project right now. And we see the two interoperating. And the code base is entirely shared, so you really can't have one. You can't have the Ruby VM or Maglev without the Smalltalk VM. And the future for us has never been brighter. We're powering big businesses all over the world. Our customer base is stable. 20% of the world's shipping containers run through a GemStone system on one of the 3 shipping customers that use GemStone 64. JP Morgan Chase is still going very strong with our product. So any rumors you hear about our demise are just that, rumors, and we've heard them before. After 24 years of doing this, we're getting used to it. Okay, this announcement was made at ESUG, and basically we're increasing the resources available for the GemStone 64 Web Edition. So more CPUs, more repository size, more objects, more shared cache size for the one low price of free. So this we had some customers doing Web Edition that kind of hit these limits, and we kind of went back to the powers that be and said, well, how should we charge for this? And their answer was, well, just don't. Just increase the limits. And we said, great, let's do that. Okay, I'll talk a little bit about the version 3 product we're working on now and what we've got in mind beyond 3.0, and that'll pretty much be it. We're re-implementing native code, which is the, I think what others have called the JIT compiler, to convert to native machine code in 3.0. It speeds up execution around 2x. This is something we had in the 32-bit land, but it's the first time we're doing it in 64-bit. This is something that a lot of our Maglev testers kind of brought to our attention, which is if you have GemStone database running, say, on your MacBook, and then you walk into Starbucks with it, and you get on their Wi-Fi, GemStone traditionally hasn't liked it very much when the host name or IP address of a machine changes while it's running, and it reacted badly to that. In 3.0 we fixed that because it turns out Ruby developers do this kind of thing quite a bit. So I don't know if anybody's noticed this problem. We hadn't noticed it because our enterprise customers are generally running on servers, but it's going to be fixed in 3.0. We've multi-threaded a lot of our algorithms that scan the entire repository. This is one of the things that's different in GemStone. When you think about listing all instances of something in a memory-based Smalltalk VM, it's not a big deal, but if you're going to look over 3 billion objects to do it, can get a bit tedious. And so we've multi-threaded a lot of these operations across as many native OS threads as you want to have to do these repository scans. Global garbage collection, listing instances, listing references, things like that are going to be much faster than they ever were before in 3.0. We have support for the FFI, foreign function interface in 3.0, so you'll be able to call out to native DLLs or shared libraries from GemStone Smalltalk without writing any C code. In the past, to do this, you had to write a little bit of C code and compile it and then call out. And people don't like writing C code, so we made it so you don't have to. We've also added support for external password authentication. Traditionally, GemStone keeps an encrypted password for user profile in the repository. And there are some enterprises that have a single sign-on solution where everybody's password for everything is out in, say, LDAP. And GemStone was the exception. We now be able to do an authentication when you log into GemStone using your LDAP password. Or you just use your Unix password if it's not the same thing. So these are the two authentication schemes we're supporting initially. In future, we'd like to get closer to a single sign-on solution, which means all the way from client Smalltalk, VisualWorks, Visual Age, going to GemStone, one password will get you in. That's a harder problem. There's a lot of moving parts involved in that, but it's someplace we'd like to get. We've also added some new password security features, requests from some of our banking customers, things that you know and love when typing passwords on the internet. You must have one uppercase character, one lowercase character, one digit, one symbol, etc., etc. So we've now got support for requiring that optionally for users' passwords. Also, we're making the password control a bit more fine-grained in 3.0. The stale account limit and password age limit used to be global settings, which was a one-size-fit-all solution. So everybody's account had to be logged into, say, within the last 2 weeks, otherwise it was disabled. There was no way to customize that for an individual user. And in 3.0, we've made that customizable to a per-user profile, which is our security object, our user object, granularity. So everybody can have their own limits and age limits as set up by the administrator. This is a bit of low-level stuff, but we use Asynchronous IO to write to our transaction log when a database transaction commits, and we've stumbled over a number of vendor async IO bugs over the years to the point where we threw up our hands and wrote our own in 3.0. So we've gone and done that and gotten around a number of problems on certain operating systems. AIX, you know who you are. Exactly. John mentioned about AntiSmalltalk as well. The AntiSmalltalk powers that be back in the day designed class-based anti-exceptions for everything back in the day, which is not the way we used to do things either, but in a drive to be more anti-compliant, we are going to do that in 3.0. The old exception hierarchy will be left in a somewhat fractured state for those diehards that insist on using it, but we're seeing the way forward to be class-based anti-exceptions in 3.0, natively supported in the VM down at the object manager bytecode level. There is support for this now in our 2X product, although it's a little slow and there are a few gotchas and some weird cases where it doesn't quite work correctly because it was implemented on top of our old exception hierarchy. So this has been a major change for us in terms of rewriting all the exceptions, and it's still going on now. It's still not finished because this crops up, as you can imagine, everywhere. I've got some faster implementations of some of our numeric classes like scale decimal and the large and negative integers. Scale decimal gets renamed to something called fixed point, and it turns out there are customers that liked the way we did scales decimal in the past, and there are customers that hated the way we did it. So what we decided to do is kind of keep both, rename scale decimal to fixed point, and the old scale decimal will still be there. Faster communication from the gem or the VM process to the stone or the database monitor process is something we looked at. In the past, this was all serialized within the shared cache. So a session would get a spin lock, put itself in the stone's work queue, and then release the lock. And what that did is forced access to the stone to be serialized. Even if for a few microseconds, it's still serialization. And we redesigned that in 3.0 to get rid of that. It's now all done with atomic operations in 3.0, so there's no serialization. There's no need to block to try to get in the stone's work queue. And some of our stress tests, we're seeing about a 30% improvement in stone response time with doing that. So there's not many customers that are really going to benefit from this, but for some of our customers that are doing things like 20,000 commits a second, they'll probably notice. With that previous change, since we don't have a queue anymore of sessions going to the stone for services, we lose the ordering that we had in the past. So it used to be a queue, first in, first out type thing. Now, with the way we're doing it, there's really no sense of order of who got there first. And to counter that, we have something called session priority now, where for certain sessions, you can deem them to be high priority, which means when the stone goes to service a batch of sessions that have asked for things, the highest gets serviced first. The default, of course, is normal priority, level 3. Some of the system gems have a low priority, level 1 or 0, because they're intended to be background processes. So this lets the designer of the system decide that this process always needs to run hot because it's very important, but these other processes don't. They can take a back seat. Our server platforms in 3.0, the main thing that changed here is HP on PA risk is gone. Good riddance, finally. And I don't think we've added anything here really from 2X. So we have both Solarises, Intel and Spark, HP on Itanium, AIX on PowerPC, Apple Mac on Intel, and Linux, various flavors on x86-64. Beyond 3.0, this is stuff that's really just in the dream phase right now, but it's things we are thinking about. Nested transactions is something that's been requested a few times. Be able to start a transaction and then start a sub-transaction and be able to abort the changes, say, from that sub-transaction without rolling back what you did in the top transaction. There are problems that would solve quite well if we were able to do that. Another one is hot standby support. This is where you have multiple databases running on multiple servers, possibly in different geographies, that are continuously synchronized kind of by the system. And then you can do things like hot failover, hot standby. It gives you a lot of fault tolerance things. Oracle calls this database clustering, if you know that term.
I have a little question. The same feature is almost as the new eventually consistent database as React or Cassandra, or nothing to do with such set of features?
I'm not clear on what your question is on that. Can you say again, please?
I would ask if the such feature, the multiple database support, is included some features similar to the feature included in the new databases that are calling the people Cassandra, React, that are called also eventually consistent, and one of the main features is that can scale horizontally.
Yeah, I think we're talking about the same thing there. The examples that we've been given by our customers are the way Oracle does it, where you can have multiple instances of the databases that are synchronized for you automatically within a few milliseconds of each other. And then if one goes down, the other one can take over and assume the role of the main database. And this is all done automatically for you by the system. I'm not familiar with Cassandra, kind of how they do it, so I really can't answer that part of it. But the design is to be more in line with how some of the other commercial database vendors do hot standby and fault tolerance.
I think the main difference is that Cassandra doesn't preserve the async property.
I see.
The async property.
Yeah, this would be an entirely transactional equivalent database. Basically, what all we would do is replay the transaction logs as they're written for you on a transaction by transaction basis. So it would be a mirror copy, and it would be updated in an ACID manner. So, commits are still atomically replayed to the standby database. It's all or nothing. So you'd never see an inconsistent state. The most you would see is a state that is a few seconds or a few milliseconds out of date. Other things on the radar are things like ODBC support, and someone here asked me a question on this from ESUG. And what we mean by this is querying into GemStone using an ODBC driver potentially if you set up your collections and tables in a certain way to do so. We had a product that did this back in the 90s, but it's written by a third party, and for various licensing legal reasons we're not able to reuse that code now, so we have to recreate that from scratch. It's something we'd like to do. IPv6, they say, is coming. They say that every year, but they still say it. So we know someday we have to support this. SSL and TLS support is actually in the product in 3.0 because we're using OpenSSL 0.98 to do the LDAP stuff. But we don't have a public API available for this yet into Smalltalk. And we certainly intend on doing that. We intend to have something like a class called GS Secure Socket or something like that that'll be able to do secure communications. It's really just a matter of doing it. All the pieces we need are already in the product to do it. Automatic load balancing across servers. That gets into when you have a very large system. Say you have 10 or 20 servers all running VMs for the same database. And when a new user is going to come and log in, how do they know which server is the least lightly loaded to run their VM on? Okay, it would be nice if the system could determine that for them automatically. Right now, there's some crude ways to do that, but it's not really what it should be in order to correctly load balance the system. So that's something we'd like to do. Single sign-on support I talked about already. It would be nice to be able to sign in to GenBuilder on the client Smalltalk image, VisualWorks or Visual Age, and get your sign-in all the way to the server and have that be the same password you use to log into Unix. There's a lot of pieces to that, but it could be done. Also, managing and monitoring support is something we've been thinking about for a long time. We looked at SNMP briefly, got very scared, and then started looking at JMX more, which is scary but less scary than SNMP. As far as having third-party tools that can plug in and monitor a running GemStone repository. That's something we still like to do. Our timeline for 3.0 is mid-next year. June 2011 is what we're tracking to there. Probably a maintenance release at the end of next year. And then that would put 4.0 probably sometime out mid-late 2012. And that's all the slides I have. Are there any questions?
VMware is a company owned by EMC, and EMC is selling and specialized in storage. Are some plans to use GemStone in another way, instead big machine as Veeam and so on?
Well, anything's possible. What you're referring to, I think, is VMware is 80% owned by EMC. And VMware EMC relationship is kind of a strange one because they're owned but only 80%. So there's some things they do like they own us, and there's some things they don't do. Like we can, for example, buy EMC hardware from them at a discount, but not for free, because we're not wholly owned, we're only partially owned. And we've only had fairly limited contact with EMC people from GemStone so far. Basically because we're only 6 months into this merger and we're still kind of waiting for the dust to settle. But, I guess my answer would be anything's possible, but nothing on the radar right now. Elliot.
Over the last years, but especially over the last year,
GemStone personnel have been heavily involved with Squeak. Can you talk about what the motivations for that are and whether that's going to continue?
I think it will continue, and I think it's shifted more towards Faro these days than it has been Squeak. But that gets to the Glass project that Dale is working on, Dale Henricks. Which I only know what Dale's doing about 10% of the time. So he comes in and says, "Oh, I'm doing all this cool stuff," and I say, "Great," and I see emails go by that says, "Thank you, Dale, for the help," and I'm not as up on that as I should be, but I think I can say it will continue. We've got some very positive feedback from that and a few actual pieces of business out of it as well. And it was kind of our foray into Seaside, was to go that direction. We decided when we wanted to do that, we don't have GemStone doesn't have a native UI anymore. They haven't for probably 20 years now. And back when we started this, must be more than 5 years ago now, I mean, that's how you did Seaside, is you loaded up Squeak and away you went. So, and we've just kind of been there ever since. So I think it will continue. Where that goes from here, I'm not sure. Dale's spending a lot of time these days working on Metacello because of his own frustrations, I think, with Monticello from what I've seen. But yeah, that's pretty much all he does, and we're going to continue with it.